Well, good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is Carl Kim. This is our National Disaster Preparedness Training Center third Thursday get together. I want to begin by wishing everyone a very happy new year. We have a really packed agenda for today. I think there are three different things that we're going to be talking about. First and foremost, we are going to be talking about PRiMO, the Pacific Risk Management Ohana. And with that, I have Jean Tanimoto from NOAA, who will help us talk about PRiMO. Jean, can you hear me?
I can. Thanks for having me, Carl.
Yes, and we can hear you too. Thanks for joining us. The other thing that in addition to talking about PRiMO and the upcoming conference that we're holding in March, we also wanted to talk about some of the recent research that I think is related to the themes of PRiMO. Last week, we were in Washington, D.C. With the Transportation Research Board annual meeting. And what we wanted to do was to summarize some of the research we presented at that meeting relevant to climate, extreme events, wildfires, and so forth. And that leads us to the third part of what we wanted to talk about was in addition to the work that we've been doing in Hawaii, in Lahaina, in California, prior to the recent Los Angeles wildfires, we wanted to save some time to share what we know about the current situation in Los Angeles and some ways that we can work together and collaborate on relevant research and engagement. So with that, I know that there are many others that are joining from, I think we had 117 people pre-register for this event. And we will try to save some time and room for discussion and engagement. So with that, I want to begin by thanking you all for joining us. And can we go to our first slide? So, Jean, what exactly is PRiMO? PRiMO is the name, of a beer. I know that. PRiMO also means cousin. I was told that as well too. Tell us about PRiMO, Jean.
Thanks, Carl. And thanks for having me. I'm Jean Tanimoto. I'm with NOAA's Office for Coastal Management here in the Pacific Islands region in our Honolulu office. And Carl asked me to come and talk a little bit about history, short, like a quick few minutes about the history of PRiMO. And, I'm happy to talk about it from a NOAA's perspective. But I also saw, as I was looking quickly at the participant list, that we have folks like Sally Jokowski on the call as well, and Jimmy Langanera, and folks who have been longtime members of PRiMO and PRiMO's leadership. So I just wanted to acknowledge that it's not just Carl and I. So feel free to chime in as we're talking about some of the PRiMO history. And, I think the idea for PRiMO really came from the thought around emergency management and the thought about relationships and how do we have the right relationships in place when we have to respond to disasters, right? And a long time ago in the early 2000s, we came up with the idea of the Federal Hazard Mitigation Roundtable. Rolls right off the tongue. It was a collection of folks who all had responsibilities in this sort of emergency management space and response. And let's just bring everyone together and let's start building relationships. Let's start understanding each other's roles better. The terrible thing is to meet someone for the first time when you're in an EOC, right? And so let's do that. That meeting went well. Let's do it again. Oh, is this becoming a thing? Maybe this is. And so, starting in those early 2000s, kind of time frame, recognizing that there is a need to bring together these conversations. Over the years, it's kind of grown and expanded from the emergency management response conversation to community resilience, to climate change impacts and adaptation strategies. We've grown the membership, as we like to say. We kind of call it the coalition of the willing, from a lot of federal agencies getting together to including state and county agencies, to including academia and private sector and community members, in order to really come together and talk about issues that affect us all, both in sort of the shocks and the stressors of our lives, and how resilience and how we plan and how we get together to make sure that our communities are safe and that they're ready for whatever might come. And so over the years, we've started to do PRiMO meetings, turns into a PRiMO conference, and that's kind of where we are right now. We're very fortunate to have a draw that is Pacific-wide. Carl mentioned that our PRiMO conference is coming up. The next one that we're hosting is here in Honolulu in March, the week of March 17th. When we look at the participants that come, we've got a lot of folks from Hawaii, obviously, in proximity to our meetings, but we've got a lot of people who come from the territories. We have a lot of people who come from outside of the US. When we've looked at some of our statistics, we realize about 25% of our participants are coming from non-US domestic audiences around the Pacific. And it really brings this rich conversation to the table on what are folks doing, how do we support each other, how do we learn from each other in the issues that really, we have so much more kinship to the islands of the Pacific that we live in versus sometimes the continent, which is where a lot of our agencies kind of stem from. So that's the super short cliff notes on that. Carl, I could go on, but I could also pause for a second.
What you're seeing are some of the pictures from, I think we're in our 20th or 21st year of PRiMO. And I know that there are many that are on the call that have attended PRiMO meetings. I think that there are two things to think about. Is first the conference, which is coming up, but also there's ongoing work of the Hui's. And I know we have Eric Yamashita here with the GIS Hui. So Eric, do you want to say a little bit about the Hui's?
Yeah, so I'm one of the co-steers people for the geospatial information Hui, and with the other person is Andrew McGowan from NOAA. And so right now we're focused on, because of the disaster of Lahaina and all the disasters in Hawaii, we're trying to put in a coordinated effort to find out what are the gaps and missing pieces in terms of geospatial technology and information that's useful for the people that respond and recover, help with the GIS parts from the counties. And so we've been trying to coordinate meetings with the different county GIS people. It's a tall task because all of them need different geospatial data. So we've been kind of working from island to island.
Yeah, so a lot of the work we do is sharing data, sharing different tools and applications, and coming together. And I think we have other Hui's as well too, including the training Hui. Lydia, are you on? I saw her briefly. I don't know if there are other Hui's. We have training. We have the Indigenous Knowledge Hui. We have Jean. Can you say a little bit more about which Hui's we have? I can't really see who we have on board.
Yep, we've got a handful of Hui's, and we really kind of fashion them as the working groups and the workhorses of our larger Hui. As Eric mentioned, we have the geospatial and data Hui, the training Hui, the Indigenous Knowledge Hui. We call it the Ike Hui, Indigenous Knowledge of the Environment Hui. And we also have health and communications. islands. And so those are sort of our main kind of pillars where we've got directed kind of conversations and and work that we like to do.
Yeah, I'm seeing the images on the screen of the last PRiMO meeting that we held in Saipan, right? Do we have anyone from Saipan on, or Jean, can you hit some of the highlights from the Saipan meeting?
Yeah, I'd love to hear. Raise your hand if you're from Saipan. I'd love to hear if you were at the meeting. One of the things that we started doing a few years ago was we used to do the PRiMO meeting in Honolulu every year. And then we started to go out to other islands. And then we started to say maybe the big conferences every other year. And in those in between years, let's go to where the people are, right? Not that there's not people here, but you know what I mean. So our last meeting that we did last February in 2024, we did in Saipan in CNMI. And it's great. And, you know, I think being able to go out to folks, obviously travel is expensive in the Pacific. Conference registration is not always affordable for folks. And so being able to go and really be in a place, talk about the issues of that place, get a little bit deeper into understanding sort of what the needs and what the successes are and what we can learn from those places has been great. And so we did Saipan the last time. Guam was before that, American Samoa. And so, you know, trying to get ourselves out into the region to make sure that we're not just talking to each other in a small group that can afford to be here, but that we're really broadening out the conversations to folks.
Yeah, and this is one way of sort of connecting with many of the other groups and organizations and alliances and consortia that we work with. And so I can see on this call, I have many of our brothers and sisters and cousins from the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center, from our University Transportation Center, and other alliances that are involved in doing work and gathering in Honolulu or in other places in the Pacific. I think PRiMO serves as a way of connecting and ensuring that we have lots of coordination and communications with this. And so it's again great to see you.
Yeah, and Carl, we've got Erin Darrington, who did join us in Saipan. She's here in Hawaii now, but it has spent many years of her career in Saipan, chiming in on the chat as well. And then, you know, just a shout out to Jimmy, who has been a long time part of the PRiMO family, who also put a great comment in the chat for us.
Great. Yeah, and so our upcoming meeting is March 17th through 20th in Honolulu. Is Leah on?
I am, Carl.
Hey, Leah, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah. Can you give us a little update on the upcoming meeting?
Sure. So early bird registration is available through the QR code and through the website. And we also have the conference theme and block agenda up on the website as well. We are working to get the full conference agenda out very, very soon, as well as the room block. And we'll be rolling from there.
Yeah, I love this theme of building coalitions and local solutions for resilience. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So the theme for the 2025 conference was really about bringing people back together. You know, since the pandemic and everything, I feel like we've been a little bit spread out, and with all the transformations happening in our new administration and everything, it's time to really come together as a coalition. And local solutions, you know, we need to really be focused in our solutions, and what might not work or what might work for the continent might not work well for us in the Pacific. So the focus really is on local solutions.
Yeah, thank you. Kung, I know you've been involved with planning for this part of the team. Do you want to say a little bit more about the upcoming meeting?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I was very involved with the planning for the PRiMO conference in 2023, and that was the very first PRiMO conference a fantastic time, and I learned a lot about collaboration and connecting with others from the Pacific region. And this platform, PRiMO, is a fantastic way to connect with others from different islands, different communities that are very similar to Hawaii in terms of its risk to climate change, to different disasters. And this platform is a great way to connect with others to promote different types of solution strategies for like-minded individuals that want to protect their communities against climate change. And I'm super excited for this upcoming conference to learn more about different communities and reconnect with one another from this past year too.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Kun. Okay. Let's go on. So the 2025 conference again has certain things that will go on. There will be plenary sessions, there will be breakout sessions, there will be training that's offered. The full program will be released shortly, but we're in the process. And so if you're interested in participating and if you're interested in being involved with many of our panels, we are focused on two panels for National Disaster Preparedness Training Center. One focuses on wildfire recovery and some of what we've learned from the Lahaina and other cases. The second one looks at overall disaster resilience, but with an emphasis on transportation assets. It's not just evacuation, but it's also about the movement of goods and services that are needed before, during, and after disasters and hazard events. And so we're focusing on that. I know that there are many other sessions that are planned, but we look forward to seeing many of you on this call at that event in March.
And Carl, if I could just make a quick plug to these, to the folks who are on this call, you know, in addition, we'd love to see all of you at PRiMO at the conference every day, but we also host a community night on the Wednesday night of that week, which is open to the public. And so making sure that folks know about it, that they, you know, if you can't make it all week or if registration is a little much, like come to community night. We're hoping to have some speakers. We're hoping to have a bunch of exhibitors and really hitting that theme of how do we build coalitions, but also how do we create local action, right? And so get a chance to come and talk to folks, find out about tools, find out about organizations in your communities that hopefully you can learn more about and get involved. So just want to put that plug in for us as well.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that Wednesday night is open to the public and to others, and we hope to bring a very diverse group together for the community night. You know, one of the big themes has to deal with climate and extreme weather events, and 2024 has been set some records in terms of not just being one of the hottest years on record, but also many climate-related disasters, from hurricanes and flooding and drought and other serious extreme events. And I think it's really important for us to come together and look at the local solutions to many of these global problems and threats that we face. Excellent. You know, a lot of the work in 24 for us focused on the Lahaina fire disaster. And work is still underway. There's still a lot of that needs to be done. And we're still trying to fully understand the disaster, what caused the fire, how it spread, and then all the work that needs to be done in terms of the cleanup, debris management, and recovery work. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to look back at this disaster that occurred in 2020, August 2023, and to bring many of the people in the community that have been working on this disaster together and to share information and knowledge on that. You know, at the university, at NDPTC, with many of our partners, we've been trying to better understand what we learned from this. We did a practicum project with the county on that, and then other types of research activities. One of the things I wanted to do was, what's the next slide? What's this slide?
This is from the Lahaina, some of our dashboards and story map of or the data we've been collecting for Lahaina.
What is this?
You can see it. It's really, I think the top left is the building typology. So we gathered a lot of data from the real property site and came up with a metric to look at the building typology. Our team of graduate assistants and staff have been compiling a lot of this data across the Lahaina.
And then that's the age group.
Yeah, and then we have fatalities. We worked with taking the data from, I think it was, what's that, that far. Is that?
Fire Research Institute.
Yeah, Fire Research Institute. They put out a report, and then we compiled some of the data they had in the report and created some GIS layers from that report. And most of those are fatalities. So.
Yeah, so we were trying to understand what caused the fire, how did the fire spread, how does this relate to the building types, the building materials, and then also what were the impacts in terms of the losses, not just the building losses, but also the impacts to the community as well too. This ties in with a lot of the research that we've been doing on social vulnerability indices and so forth. And I think this is applicable to many, many different disasters, other fires, but also other hazards and threats. A big part of the work that we do is try to integrate technology. As many of you know, I don't know if Mike Vorse or other members from our 360 team we integrate satellite, aerial, drone, 360 imagery, and bring this together to be able to analyze what was there before, what was left there currently, and then to monitor the progress towards recovery. We're also very interested in integrating machine vision, machine learning applications. Many of you may recall a few weeks ago, we did a AI in wildfires third Thursday event. And then prior to that, we had an AI in disaster management webinar as well too. Obviously, there are very powerful tools that are out there. And part of the work we're doing is how can we integrate this into better preparing the responders and those who are involved with the recovery efforts in the information needs and requirements. So what I'd like to now is turn quickly to some of the work that we presented last week at the Transportation Research Board meetings in Washington, D.C. I know many on the call were there, and I look forward to highlighting some of the major things that we were working on. Next slide. The first project that we worked on was on resilience hubs. And we were interested in actually two types of resilience hubs. The first type of hub is a pre-designated hub or place where people could get emergency supplies or resources. And then the other type of hub is the spontaneous hub that was created by the community, and what are the factors that facilitate the creation of these spontaneous hubs, right? I know Kung and others have been working on that. Kung, do you want to say a little more about the Resilience Hub research that we've been doing?
Yeah, I was very interested in resilience hubs as I was a grad student, and that transferred onto this role at NEPTC. When we looked at the recovery efforts of the fire disaster, we noticed that a lot of sites were set up as spontaneous resilience hubs to help the impacted residents with food distribution, clothing, medicine. So we used that as an inspiration for this piece that we worked on as a poster at TRB to really understand that criteria to really develop those spontaneous resilience hubs into those pre-designed resilience hubs in the future. So we distributed an online anonymous survey nationwide on different types of criteria: safety and security, social and community needs, mobility and access, and environmental protection and restoration in local cultural contexts. And we used a multi-criteria decision-making approach called the analytical hierarchy process to really quantitatively rank these criteria from the survey responses and to see which criteria was most important to least important. So as you can see on the table, we found that safety and security was the highest ranked of all the criteria, and local cultural contact was the least ranked criteria. And for future studies, we really want to be involved with Lahaina residents in conducting workshops and further community engage with them to really pinpoint which criteria is important to Lahaina residents to designate future resilience hubs for Lahaina's recovery.
Yeah, and so resilience hub are a type of local solution that we think we need to invest more in. The second paper that we presented was on greenways and part of it is if we have resilience hubs or other locations where we know that people need to get to or people need to come to, how would they get to it? And so one way I was thinking about was improving the transportation mobility. I don't know if Ethan or anyone else from that team is on the call right now. Eric, do you know? You see it? See that? This is part of the ongoing work that we have in terms of transportation, mobility, access, and Dingy is on. Dingy, do you want to say anything about the Greenways project that we did? Or Ethan?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I can say something. So yeah, so one of the approach that we can connect from the residential areas to resilience hub is like we're proposing this greenway, like this greenway, like kind of connecting from the those residential areas to the resilience hub and provide a fast and safe like evacuation routes to residents. And same we also have 4 different criteria and to ask participants rank like each criteria. And it turns out the proximity to activity generators are the most concerns from the survey participants, and the recreational amenities is the least concerns of them.
Right. Yeah. So we're looking at the criteria for that, but also looking at the alignments, the choices, where the greenways should go, and which populations that they should serve before, during, and after. I think Ethan is doing his master's thesis on this. I don't see him on this call, but we'll have more research done on this. Okay, let's go to the next slide. The research that I want to describe here is a part of the larger work that we're doing related to transportation resilience. We're part of a consortium, the Center for Surface Transportation Testing and Academic Research, that includes many, many other universities and partners across the nation. And with that group, we have a team led by the Mineta Transportation Institute, MTI, at San Jose State University. And we are part of a climate change, extreme events, training and research center that's directed by Karen Philbrick and
I don't know what I did
Hillary.
wrong.
Hillary
I'm on
Nixon.
here, getting the slides, but I can't hear anything.
I beg your pardon? Who was that?
Dolores.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was perhaps Hillary or
She's talking to.
yeah. Is Hillary or Karen on the call? If not, let's just proceed. Okay, so our other paper that we presented was part of the CRISI project that we have with MTI, with Mineta Transportation Institute. It's the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements. And this is funded by the Federal Railway Administration. And the project that we started, this is before Lahaina, that was before Los Angeles, was focusing on wildfire risk and rail lines in the United States, focusing principally on California and the western part of the country. Next slide. This is actually part of the first project, which you see right here, which is called the Climate Change Extreme Events Training and Research Program. We also have two other CRISI grants. One of them works on workforce development with the University of South Florida, and that just started. And then we just recently heard that we were awarded part of a new CRISI grant that focuses on the safety and testing for hydrogen and natural gas for the rail industry. We'll talk more about that later. But again, what I wanted to shift to right now is to focus on our presentation we did on wildfire risk to California. This is a team effort also. In addition to University of Hawaii, we have Haley and Aldridge. And I don't know if is Danielle or David on, and the Pacific Disaster Center as part of our team members on this. And basically what this project involved doing is tracking wildfire risk in California and then overlaying the rail lines and then identifying segments or locations that were most at risk. We have a short video, I think it's 5 minutes, that describes this tool that we've developed. I hope this will run on this, but basically it involves assessing what the exposure is and then estimating the risks and potential impact to the
National
railways
Disaster
as well
Preparedness
too.
Center,
So
working with Haley Aldrich and the Pacific Disaster Center, are working to develop a climate resilience extreme events portal for evaluating wildfire risk to railroads and making that information readily available. The core objectives are a vulnerability assessment framework for the analysis of wildfire risk to railways and the development of a user portal for accessing and visualizing the vulnerability data. The vulnerability assessment framework comprises three main aspects: exposure, using wildfire occurrences as well as other factors including topology and fuel availability, an evaluation of sensitivity of assets to wildfire, and the adaptive capacity, which includes the capability to respond and suppress an impacting wildfire. This framework is the core of the risk data that is presented on the portal. PDC's Disaster-Aware application is a global alerting platform able to integrate source data on a variety of natural and man-made hazards. The user community for the system includes local, state, and federal agencies, international and regional organizations, as well as other national governments. Disasterware displays hazards, other data layers, and map products to provide situational awareness for users. Wildfires have increased in frequency and intensity, particularly in the western United States. Here we see wildfires during 2024 in California and surrounding areas displayed on DisasterAware. We can add in layers of rail stations and highway crossings, rail facilities, rail bridges, and see the area vulnerable to damage from wildfires just in the last year. Clearly, surface transportation is vulnerable to the damaging effects of wildfire, with billions of dollars in damages having already been incurred. Wildfires pose risk to railways in areas with steep topology, sufficient fuels to sustain fire, and meteorological conditions that drive large fires. The outcome of the vulnerability assessment framework is the determination of burn probability. That's an index that is then applied across the study area, which in this case is the state of California. We're going to take a look at burn probability and the supporting layers that are displayed within DisasterAware based on those values. Burn probability is derived from a weighted algorithm that assigns specific weighting to exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. This initial visual data layer is the rail network. It's assembled from several different data sets to represent the entire network across the U.S. The burn probability layer intersects with the rail network to show where on the network it may be impacted by higher or significant probabilities of fire. The wildfire weather layer indicates where meteorological conditions might encourage or sustain fire. The Wildfire Suppression Difficulty Index shows the challenges that would be encountered in trying to suppress a fire in that location, either because of the difficulty of the terrain or the unavailability of equipment. DisasterAware will allow users to put one or more layers on top of each other to intersect with the rail network and see the possible effects. DisasterAware is using bookmarking to indicate the 5 study areas from the vulnerability analysis. Bookmarks also allow you to change the extent that you can see of the layer, in this case zooming in on 3 northern study areas in California. In the same way, we're able to zoom in on Chino Hills and Cajon Pass. Bookmarking in DisasterAware preserves the combination of layers and the extent so that analysis can be done on risk and vulnerability for specific areas with specific layers. Among the possible outcomes of this risk analysis is the opportunity for prevention, mitigation and response to risk, and recovery preparedness.
This is the work that we presented last week. We have obviously detailed papers and reports, which we're willing to share with you if you're interested. And I think this is all work that we had started prior to last week's outbreak of the Los Angeles fires, which are turning out to be very, very significant, both in terms of the size of the event and then the number of people, structures, and communities that have been impacted. And so for the last part of today's session, what we would like to do is to spend some time talking about the LA fires. I've asked Amy. Amy, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, Amy has been compiling a lot of our work and from multiple sources, not just from DisasterAware, but from other sources as well too, We know that this fire was very large and impacted many communities. I want to turn it over to Amy to hit some of the highlights of what we've compiled so far.
Right. So what really made this fires interesting, it wasn't just one area, like Carl said, it was multiple areas, and it's still burning. As of this morning, we have the Palisades and the Eaton fire still burning. Although the critical Santa Ana winds, that threat has diminished, but it came through, it diminished, and then it came through again. So now that we're kind of getting a handle on it, but it is still burning. And what's interesting is we're getting these detailed reports on the structures burn. We're getting them at different rates. So for the Palisades and Eaton fires, we're getting more of the maps coming through. But for the fires like the Hearst fire, we have 2 structures damaged. But for the Eaton fire, we have 28,000 structures damaged. So the rate of their coming in and the data we're getting is very varied, which I think makes it a very interesting case study. So it was driven by the Santa Ana winds. We do have 25 fatalities, but as of this morning, we still have 36 people still unaccounted for. So we are expecting to see this fatality risk or fatality rate still rise. And we have over 40,000 acres burned. But what really sticks out to me is the environmental damage and environmental public health safety and emergency that's out there. What we're seeing is the ash from these fires, and the Santa Ana winds will come back. And when that picks up, they are issuing an emergency for all of the surrounding areas. So it's not just this footprint of what was burned, it's all the surrounding areas. And it's the economic damages. I just think we are beginning to see, but they're estimating between $250 to $275 billion in economic damages. So it's still unfolding, but we are kind of de-escalating the impact, but we're not there yet. So I'll turn it back over to you, Carl.
Thanks. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, as we all know, this is still an ongoing disaster. We're still trying to collect and compile information from many other sources, and hopefully we'll know more about this. So we've been putting together different maps and estimates of the damage. We haven't as yet deployed our 360 camera technology. We're looking at this. Obviously, there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of the response efforts right now. And then, as you know, National Disaster Preparedness Training Center does do courses and work on damage assessment, on debris management, and then also recovery work. And so, again, we're still assessing what the needs are and trying to identify appropriate partners and so forth for both the response and recovery efforts. Slide. So before opening up for the discussion, part of where we are right now is trying to extract some of the lessons, some of what we found out from the work we've been doing in Hawaii, and to see how much of it would be relevant and related to the Los Angeles wildfire. Notably, there are other fires as well too, and other disasters. And I think it's important to think about the characteristics of these places and compare what is similar, what is different, what's universal, what's really unique in terms of this. And so we've started that initial analysis of comparing these disasters, but I think more work needs to be done. And so what I would like to do with the remaining 15 minutes is open this up for discussion. There may be others who know a lot more than us right here in Hawaii about what's happening in Los Angeles. Is there anyone from Los Angeles that wants to comment or add to this? Anyone on this call? I can't see if there are hands raised before I start calling people out, right? Anyone else from our team want to add something?
I actually had something to add. I was trying to go really fast because I didn't want to prevent other people from talking, but there's just so much with these fires. But I just wanted to add something that actually, Carl, you had me research. Part of it was the fire retardant used and that the environmental impacts. I think that's going to make a very interesting case study in the future, especially given these first rains. Just the ash itself mixing in with the ocean water, but mixed with this fire retardant. I'm just really interested to see the environmental impacts on the reef and just the erosion itself and what grows back in this area, given the fact that we know the fire risks and the known knowns and what are the unknown knowns now moving forward. So just something to kind of put out there, something to look not forward to, but just something to study.
Yeah, we tried to produce an FAQs on the fire retardant, and then the consequences or the impacts of exposure to the retardant materials, but also some of the other concerns using seawater and so forth. And so I think there are some important lessons and concerns to extract from this as well too. I don't know if anyone else has other topics or questions that have come up in the course of their research. I know there are many groups that are coming together around this, and some of this is really unique to the situation in California, while other concerns are more universal with regard to suppression techniques and so forth. Maybe one way of doing this is, is anyone on that is from California that can give us firsthand insights as to the impacts and what the needs are and what's happening on the ground? Anyone? I hear somebody. No? Okay,
Carl,
hearing
this is
that.
Nicole. I am not
great.
in California, but
Yeah.
on the retardant, I actually did some research. It's a product called FosCheck MBPFX, and it's ammonium phosphate. So it's another, essentially will have the impacts of salt. So it's salt on salt, just like you said, with the salt water used to put out the fire. And so the habitat restoration in the burn scar area is going to be difficult. And then the contaminants obviously built from the structures. And of course, in Paradise and other fires where PVC pipe was used as lat lines and in other places to convey water, we saw them leaving, even underground, the heat was so intense that we had only ash. And so that left a great deal of contaminants. And there's been benzene in potable water systems in California previously post-fire, and some additional sort of feedback about other water contaminants are already being identified. That's what we're hearing on the ground. From folks on the ground.
And this is Nicole Boothman-Shepherd, who is with Vice President for Resilience and Recovery from AECOM, and also one of our newest navigators for PRiMO.
Thank you. Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Nicole. Are there others on the call that want to comment about the fire in Los Angeles in terms of the impacts, what we're seeing?
This is Nicole. Can I just make one more quick comment?
Absolutely.
One of the things that the mayor of LA, of course, LA is not the only city that was affected, right? Because there are other cities in the metro area that have experienced very severe impacts. But the mayor, in order to promote swift rebuilding, essentially reduced barriers to reconstruction that basically allowed like kind. And obviously, if that does if that is sustained, it interferes with the opportunity cost to build in the WUI and the wildland urban interface, in a safer way, in a fire and multi-hazard risk mitigation method. So certainly something I think to watch and try to influence, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's kind of relevant. I was talking earlier to one of our PhD students, David Marasco, about some of the work he's been doing, looking at the spread of the fire and some of the other factors related to this. He showed me a map yesterday of some of the work that he put together. So, Dave, do you want to say a little bit about that?
This is not, I just did some cursory research right after the fires happened because Amy's from LA. I lived there for a while and I'm from California. And of course we look at these communities and everybody has an awareness of where maybe fire is likely to break out in places like Los Angeles, right? There's an omnipresent awareness of things like fires breaking out in the canyons and things like that. But I was really curious about whether or not there was any a priori information regarding the likelihood of these fires. And if you give me a minute, I can pull this. I did a very quick map using data from the National Forestry Service, and it shows aggregate fire risk to homes built in every area of the US. And so this information is readily available and can be easily mapped. And I'll let Carl take it for 1 second while I pull this up and try to share my screen.
Sure. Yeah, I think that relates to some of the ongoing work that we've been doing, in Maui. It started, in the potentially started by power lines in forested, wooded areas, but then spread to grassland areas, and then a lot of the work that we've been focusing on, working with FEMA's Building Sciences group. Has focused on the building materials and what could be done in terms of reducing the risk of fire, the risk of spread, and so forth. And a lot of this does relate to building codes and then also zoning and other factors that affect the spread of the fire and also the challenges associated with putting the fire out or containing the fire. Another thing that we've been asked about is what does this mean, percent contained? And so we've been trying to understand that. I know Eric has done some research on that topic. You see that the fire is 20% contained today. What does that really mean, and how do we explain that? And that's also Eric, if you want to say something about that.
I think it's somewhat subjective, right? Because it's based on the fire department what's fighting the fire, how a perimeter is set around the fire, and so that perimeter can change, it fluctuates, right? So when they say 20%, it doesn't really mean the fire is totally 20%. The entire fire is contained. It's within that perimeter is set. So it's this ongoing research that we're looking into. If that's the right message that goes out to the news, when it goes out to the news, people think that the public thinks, oh, it's 20% or 50%, contained, but it's making the wrong messaging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Am I able to share my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. I'm going to put it up right now. And yeah, that's it. So this map, can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. So this map is of the first 5 fires before the latter 2 had broken out. And this data is aggregate fire risk from the Forestry Service, and it's compiled by Melissa Jaffe and Joe Scott and their team. And we've used this data for a lot of different things, but we've looked at the Marshall Fire and the Lahaina Fire and now this fire. And what we found is that this data is strongly correlated with where these fires break out, and not only where they break out, but their severity, right? And so, like, of course, in Los Angeles, there is a fair amount of fire risk in and around the mountains. But what this shows right here is that the white area, because I usually do this in a contour map, but I wanted it to be more expedient to just show darkness here. So this is housing overlaid on the Los Angeles area. So anywhere that's white has housing. Anywhere that's not the topography color is housing, right? So white is the lowest risk area, and then it goes up, it scales up to black on the gradient. And if it's black, it means that the aggregate fire risk, the homes in that space, is extremely high based on a variety of metrics. So once it's aggregated, we can see that the Palisades fire and the Hearst fire and the Eaton fire were all in very black areas. And of course, they're on the edges of mountain ranges, so that's somewhat predictable, but it shows how far it extends out. And these happened exactly where people would think they would happen. The Sunset fire is not so readily obvious, but as you can see, there are streaks of black within the Sunset fire area close to the Hollywood Hills. So we know that a lot of those homes were already at severe risk. The only one that doesn't have a lot of black is the Kenneth fire, but that makes sense because it's thought that the Kenneth fire was started by an arsonist. And so there wasn't that pre-existing risk at the same level in those areas. So the Kenneth fire was ignited in maybe a lower risk area, but the other 4 fires that broke out, all those homes had very significant risk to be in there. And in the case of the Palisades fire, there were not many ways in and out of the community. So that's something that definitely should have been looked at beforehand. And
Right.
this data is available with Forestry Service. Anybody wants to look it up or wants a link to it and all the different metrics they have, I'll try to put something in chat.
Yeah,
That's it.
thank you, David. I also see that Tara had, Tara, can you join us?
I'm here.
Yeah, I see your comment that you made about this, percent containment. Again, I think that's useful to reiterate. I think the point that you made. Could you do that?
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember, I think it was a CAL FIRE public information officer maybe that said it. It's when they say 20%, they mean 20% of the perimeter that they could just walk away from and it won't keep burning or growing. That was how he explained it. I'm sure there's fire experts on this call, so please, I don't want to jump in but that was what they were saying on the national news as a way to think of it, which it makes sense, but at the same time, like Eric points out, like, is that, because it's like with weather when there's a 20% chance of rain and people don't really realize that just means 20% of the area will get measurable rain, right? We think it means 20%. So we think 20% of the fire must be 20% of the acreage of the fire, and that's not what it means.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Tara, thank you for joining us. Tara is someone that we work with as well too. And we do a lot of work on transportation and evacuation. And I think that there are some growing concerns about the evacuation challenges, especially in some of these communities. One of the analyses that we've been looking at, for example, is the difference between gridded streets versus cul-de-sac areas. And I think that there are other groups that are underserved in terms of evacuation, and in particular, those with limited mobility or access and functional needs. So I don't know, Tara, if you want to say a little bit more about that as well, because I know you do a lot of work on bike and pedestrian studies as well too. So
yeah, I mean, not a lot to add. You've covered a lot of really important stuff, but as we've seen both with the Lahaina and unfortunately already with the Los Angeles fires, that the majority of people who can't or aren't able to evacuate are older adults and people with disabilities. There was the terrible case. I'm sorry, this is it's tough to talk about, but in LA, if you heard, there was a man and his son, both wheelchair users, and they weren't able to get out, and the man was not going to leave his son no matter what. So just story after story. So really needing to think about not just how we do that in the response time, but how we're planning for that better.
Yeah, and that unfortunately is something that we need to really, I think, spend more time and attention focusing on those underserved populations that really were disproportionately impacted as well too. I think we're still really in the response phase of this disaster. I see many of our colleagues from the National Domestic Preparedness Consortium. I don't know, Van Romero, who's chairman of the consortium. I don't know, Van, if you want to say a little bit about the consortium's work. We had our principals meeting yesterday, but Van, it's good to see you.
Thank you, Carl. It's always good to promote the National Domestic Preparedness Consortium, where University of Hawaii is really the leader for natural disasters for our consortium, but we look at all different disasters. And oh, by the way, there was a few others. So over the holidays, both in New Orleans and in Las Vegas, Nevada. So our first responders are continuing to be challenged, and we need to do everything we can to support them.
Yeah, thank you, Van, and thank you for reminding us in terms of the importance of us working together across different types of hazards and threats. And I think one of the gaps that does exist is related to a wildfire, understanding of wildfire science, understanding of wildfire risk, but then the ways in which we can improve response and recovery, mitigation and adaptation to these wildfires, because they're increasing both in terms of the size and impact, but also the frequency and now the duration of them as well too. And so and I think it's very much tied to drought. It's tied to other sorts of impacts as well too. The large La Nina that we had, which contributed in some places to the vegetation growth, but then also to the conditions, the arid conditions, and the directions of the winds and other factors as well too that we need to continue studying and understanding, and then translating that into actions for responders, but also those who are involved in preparing our communities for these types of hazards and threats. I'm looking over the comment list. Is there anyone else that wants to make a comment or ask a question or raise a point for this related to PRiMO, related to the work we're doing on transportation? Do you see anyone?
Aloha. My
Yes.
name is Lieutenant Colonel Katie Kalama. I actually am a member of the Hawaii Army National Guard, but I work for the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command
Yes.
in their defense support to civil authorities. One of the big takeaways for me seeing this discussion is the potential for the data sharing. The data that you guys are collecting from across multiple different agencies really could be used for prevention. And one of the biggest things for me, I've been a Hawaii resident for over 20 years, and the thing for me is being able to get this information out to the public and to be able to let them answer the question for themselves, am I at risk? And getting the data out there so that the communities can really take ownership and be involved in preventing their own spaces from wildfires or any types of disaster, and knowing and understanding what their risks are. So from my perspective, that data sharing across the agencies could be really significant in helping us get the word out to the communities so that they can take ownership in prevention when it comes to a disaster like this. So thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to attend.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we really agree with that idea that, information is really critical to decision making and planning and the types of investment strategies that we make. And it's not just in terms of, where you purchase your home and where you live, but I think also in terms of all the sorts of actions that we can take to reduce risks and reduce the threat, and then to be able to respond and recover from when bad things happen. But thank you for joining us. Are there other comments or thoughts?
I have a question. Maren Purvis, I'm in Hilo. I'm part of HVERI. Why are people in fire-prone areas allowed to have flammable roofs? Why don't they all have metal roofs like we do here?
Interesting. Yeah, and that would deal with the ember problem as well too, or the reduce the fire risk, and that's part of the mitigations that could be done to, and I think that relates to building codes. It also relates to building practices as well too. I don't know if anyone else has any insights into metal roofs and a requirement of metal roofs. That's certainly that would reduce some of the risk, but again, as we saw in Lahaina, there were structures with metal roofs that also managed to burn as well too.
We're Jeho Choi from NDPTC. As an architecture background, usually the international building codes are updated after a large disaster, and then the building codes only give you minimum requirement for the structures to be safe. So in this case of a large fire, I think surely they will see other options to fire-prone areas to have updated metal shielding roofs, or maybe other materials that is less prone to fire.
Yeah, and then also we want to sort of preserve many of our structures that may have been built with, traditional building materials. And so the question is important and it's a complex one, but I think it's also related to preservation and some of the codes that exist to maintain the character or image of a community. But good point to raise from a safety perspective first. But what does that mean? How does that translate into the management of risk and adaptation? Other questions, comments, or thoughts?
Well, actually, one thing is, Farnaz, are you on this call?
Yes.
Oh, another one of our PhD students, Farnaz.
Yeah,
it's good to see you.
This is our expert. This is our expert on the building materials in Lahaina. Would you care to comment on that to kind of round us out here?
Yeah, actually, initially, when I was thinking about the Lahaina, I was thinking that the evacuation was the most important thing that went wrong. But gradually, when we moved forward and I collected more and more data about the buildings, I found out that the main problem maybe is the initial fire that it starts and then it spreads. And it's because of the materials that we use in the buildings. And as you mentioned, as Jaho mentioned, when these kind of big disasters happen, I think after that, gradually the government, they will think about the building codes and they will for sure, I think, update it. And in Lahaina, we had so many buildings that the roof was just totally from wood and they will ignite the fires so fast. So I think, yeah, this problem is one of the most significant problems that we have.
Yeah, and so part of what we're trying to do is to look at the science, the engineering, but I think also the social science, the choices that people make, the investments that people make, the actions that they take, and some of the things that they don't do. And so part of this, I think, brings this to we need to include a wide range of approaches and disciplines. And so that's what our center is committed to doing. Are there others that want to add something? I see, Jimmy Lagurno. I haven't seen you in a long time. Jimmy, do you want to say what you just posted in the chat?
Yeah, and thank you all for all that you guys do. It truly is about partnership. And so There's actually a study right now about that home that survived Lahaina, and just the things that that homeowner had done just beforehand about having a fire break around their home. And so you look at that last link, it's actually serving as a model for others to consider. How can everything else burn, but mine didn't? Well, because the homeowner took, preparedness measures to better protect his home. And sure, it was also stated also too is, many of these building materials and everything else, they only have a level of resistance, but it's when you overcome that resistance over time, or you have lithium batteries or other flammable materials, it may protect on the outside, but what about the inside? So there's so much that we can learn, and it's ongoing partnerships. And that's why also too earlier on, I'd shared that the governor's climate action team had recommended a bunch of recommendations, of which PRiMO has been doing for many, many years, of having a conference. Wow, we've been doing it since 2003. Of community building. Wow, we also been doing that since 2003. And so hopefully it can kind of go full circle, and instead of just creating a new conference, that they can partner further with us. And so there's a lot of recognition, a lot of opportunities. When you think about also too, UH had deployed those drone sailcraft off the coast of Lahaina for coastal water monitoring. That's an opportunity there also too, over on the West Coast as well. So, just trying to tie the research to the responders to the officials. It's an ongoing concern, especially with the changing political climate and the very short time frame of memory that people have regarding these events. We've had them, but when are they going to learn?
Okay, well, I see now that we've gone past an hour right now. I want to start bringing us to a close. I want to begin by thanking everyone for joining us for this third Thursday event. We look forward to seeing you in a future third Thursday event, but also at the PRiMO meetings. Jean, are you still on? Any closing thoughts?
No, just echoing an open invitation to anyone who is interested in coming and joining us at PRiMO.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dingy. Thank you, everyone else who's in this room here too. And so with that, I'd like to close this session. There will be future discussions on these related topics. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns or suggestions or ways in which we can collaborate and share information, please contact us. Thank you all very much, and aloha.